Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, what was your biggest challenge starting out as an entrepreneur? New entrepreneurs always ask me this question, and I think people are looking for these canned answers that are universal. And the truth is, I can give you some of the most common challenges, but they will never be your biggest challenge. So let's just talk about some common challenges. Funding is always a challenge when you're a new entrepreneur. Marketing, getting the right marketing message, reaching the right target market, getting them to convert is always a challenge when you're a new entrepreneur. Converting sales is always a challenge when you're a new entrepreneur. Meeting the demand of your customers, if all of a sudden it takes off, is always a challenge when you're a new entrepreneur. Having to pivot or change your product or service to meet the market wants once they've given you feedback is always a challenge when you're a new entrepreneur. But none of those things will be your biggest challenge because you can easily anticipate those things because every entrepreneur has those challenges. What your biggest challenge will always be will be very unique to you and may not even be close to what my biggest challenge was. So let me tell you about my biggest challenge of being a new entrepreneur. So we got to go back a long, long time ago. My biggest challenge was getting the courage to come home from my career job, a job that I had been on for 15 years, a job that was paying our mortgage and our car note, a job that was providing health insurance for not only my wife and I, but our 3 kids, a job that was financing the lifestyle that we had become accustomed to, the job that was going to provide me a pension when I retired. To come home from that job and tell my wife that I was going to give up the security of all of that, to try my hand at something I had never done, with no security, nothing to ensure success. But I wanted her to trust me and support me in trying to be an entrepreneur. That was my biggest challenge. It wasn't hard to convince myself, and ultimately it wasn't hard to convince her, but to have the courage to even come home and just to have the conversation, to say that I know I invested 15 years. I know I invested money in getting a graduate degree to get the job. I know I invested, so much into that. And I want to walk away from that and take a chance on living and dying on my own, where I don't have the experience, where I don't have the funding, where I don't even know what product or service I could even possibly sell. But to come home and say, I want freedom, and it could be at the expense of everything that we built over the last 15 years. That was my biggest challenge. I don't know that would be your biggest challenge. Everything else after that to me was easy because once I was able to have that conversation and once I knew I had 100% support, none of those other challenges, funding, product or service, customers, none of that was a bigger challenge. So your biggest challenge will always be unique to you. And one thing that you always have to understand is even when you're not a new entrepreneur, it's like being a new entrepreneur all the time. And so new challenges will come up. Why? Social norms change. People's spending habits change. People's desires change. The economy changes. Regulations change. There are so many things externally that change that will affect, even if you're doing everything perfectly, the outside world is constantly changing. So you'll always have a new challenge, a new big challenge that you have to overcome until you don't want to do it anymore. So I don't know that my biggest challenge, or even telling you my biggest challenge, is helpful for you, because your biggest challenge is not going to be the most common challenge, because those are the things you can prepare for. Your biggest challenge will be the one you're not prepared for. And it will just take the courage to push forward anyway. So if you're an entrepreneur, I'd love for you to share what your biggest challenge was. If you're brand new, what your biggest fear is in becoming an entrepreneur. But please like, share, subscribe. Keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.